Morning, everyone. I will call this special meeting to order. It's 9:30, and I would ask that we stand for a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. I would ask if anyone has a pecuniary interest to declare it either now or at the time. Seeing none, do you have any rise and report from our in-camera sessions?
Thank you, Warden. There is one item. County Council has endorsed the settlement of a collective agreement with the Lambton County Employee Association. That's LCEA-CFNIA Local 3020, which represents employees from 3 divisions in the libraries, court administration, and museums. It's a 4-year collective agreement that is retroactive to January 1st of 2017 and runs to the end of 2020. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I would, now we have a delegation, I would call on a motion to allow Mr. Sandy Marshall, Executive Director of Bio-Industrial Innovative Canada, to come within the rail. Councillor McDougall, second by Councillor Napper. All in favour of that? That's carried. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Well, thank you, and good morning, and thank you.
There you go.
There. Now I'm a little louder. Everybody always says I have a loud voice anyway, so I'll try to talk down now. So, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Warden, thank you, Council, and management for allowing me to come today. Just as a short introduction myself, I grew up here in County, moved here in '78, and have been in Sarnia, part of Sarnia and Lambton ever since that time. Spent my whole career at Polysar, Nova, Bayer, Lanxess, and finished up in 2013 as President of Lanxess Canada, and now since July as Executive Director of Bio-Industrial Innovation Canada. The purpose of this meeting here is to gain approval for a line of credit, for a backing for a line of credit for $4.5 million. And I'll take you through a bit of the background of BIC so that we can get there. There we go. So the BIC was founded in 2008 as a Center of Excellence for Commercialization and Research with funding from the federal government through NSERC. And $25 million came from through that CSER. And the focus of that CSER was to basically create jobs, economic value in the sustainable chemistry space. We worked very closely in those early days and continue to work very closely with a lot of local groups like Sarnia and Lambton Economic Partnership. They work. They are a very close link of ours into the county, as well as to a pipeline of new projects and ideas coming to us. We work very closely with Western Sarnia and Lambton Research Park, who have been integral in what we do, as well as Lambton College. What is our real focus here? We as a group provide critical strategic investment advice and services to early stage startup companies that are in the clean, green, and sustainable technology space. That all sounds like a lot of fancy words, but I'll get a little bit more as we move across here into the... So how do we do that? We basically run on 3 basic premises. The first is cluster building, and I would say that the primary focus of our cluster building since 2008 has been the work we've been doing here in Sarnia-Lambton. The work that's been done on trying to attract companies like BioAmber and other companies into the region to set up their shop here has been important to us. A second part of what we do is the critical strategic investment. From the CSER funding that we received in 2008, we took $5.5 million of that funds and invested it in 14 startup companies. And I'll give you a little bit more information on them as we go along. But not only do we just invest in these companies, we also have a very strong board and management with a lot of industry and industrial experience. And we spend a lot of time volunteering our time to support and provide advice to these startup companies as they are maturing. So what we use this graphic here just to give us a bit of a sense of an overview of how this works. So critical to the success of the Sarnia-Lambton cluster, biocluster, has been the integration of these companies into the traditional chemical value chain this year. As everyone knows, we have had a very robust chemical industry here, and you can see that they kind of represent the blue boxes along here, all the different aspects, whether it be your energy companies, your chemical companies, your oil and gas, and so on. What we have tried to do is to take these help these startup companies plug into this existing value chain. It saves them money, less capital investments required. It also allows them to leverage the same infrastructure they have, whether it be rail, skilled labor, and so on that we have within the region. So basically, being able to take these companies and plug them into the existing infrastructure here in Sarnia has been a very, very important part of us being able to make these companies successful in this region. So, as I said, we are originally a CSER, founded in 2008. Our original funding ended in 2014, and BIC started in 2012 to try and find replacement funding for the CSER funding that we had. The first piece of funding we received was this Bioproducts Ag-Sci cluster in 2014, and what this does is basically we manage a portfolio of research projects on behalf of the federal government on agriculture and agri-food Canada, developing bioproducts which have a benefit to agriculture. This project or this portfolio is important to us because it provided us a small amount of funding to allow us to keep moving forward once our CSER funding had been exhausted. Unfortunately, through that time, we only had the small amount of funding coming from our Bioproducts Ag-Sci cluster to keep us moving. We started in 2012, as I said, to obtain other funding for our ComSci project, or here the Commercialization of Sustainable Chemistry Innovation. It took us 2 years to get this funding in place. The first year of this was a very slow process of working through the government approval processes, and then ultimately we lost another year because before we got final ministerial approval, the writ was dropped and we went into a federal election last year. And so BIC basically lost 2 years of our funding cycle due to these various delays. So finally, we received our funding, as you see here, $15 million from the federal and provincial governments in April of 2016 for a project that officially started in January of 2015. So as you can imagine, we were running in a very thin way at that time. And so from the time we received our funding in April until the end of last year, until the end of December, we've been staffing back up, getting our organization active again, reviewing and updating our strategic plan, and basically getting ourselves going again. I will say that these are some of the challenges as to why I'm here today, asking for a special session for you to look at supporting us with the backing of this loan. It has taken us the most of last year, and here we are 2 years into our existing mandate, to get to a place where we clearly know where we're going forward and in our projects that we're working on. So now I'd like to step back a little bit and look at the results of the last CSER, because I think that gives you a better sense of where you can expect things to go here. So BIC invested in 14 companies. This graphic basically shows the blue dots, which were the various companies. As you can see, our focus is to accelerate them towards commercialization, which is kind of that green line. And as you can see, a lot of companies went along that line. But as you can also see, there is also the runoff track at the bottom where some of the companies fail. And this is very typical of early stage investment in emerging companies, in that some do very, very well, some don't do well at all, and these are some of the challenges we have, is to try and work within a portfolio to, on average, do well with these companies. In this group of companies, for those locally, we've invested in companies like BioAmber, Woodland Biofuels, Green Core Energy, or Green Core, and KMX are all projects that we've been involved with over our last few years. So despite the fact that we've had a number of investments there, some of which are doing well and some that haven't, there's been some very strong economic spin-off that has occurred. So from this $5.5 million investment that we have done over the last 8 years, we have had over $140 million of money from venture capital, angels, and other government sources coming along to align with us in our consortiums or our syndicates to invest in these companies. So there's been a very strong leverage of that $5.5 million with other funds coming into the companies that we work with. On top of that, since that time, 3 of our companies have IPO'd, including BioAmber and so on. And these companies have managed to collect over $50 million of funds from various other sources as well. We've created over 2,000 jobs. These jobs, the majority of them have been in Sarnia because of the Sarnia Lambton, because of the construction of the new BioAmber plant and a number of demonstration plants. And as you can see here, it's just another repeat of showing that the small amount of $5.5 million that we've invested and how it's moved forward. So if you look at what we've accomplished over the last 8 years, there's been quite a leverage on the monies that we've had, a lot of jobs created, and quite a bit of economic value, much of which you can see in Sarnia Lambton. So where are we going now? Well, in the last 4 years, some of our projects have been more focused in the collection of the raw materials. So the raw material sourcing is a very important anchor of creating these clusters. And if we just think back 150 years ago to the discovery of oil in Oil Springs and Petrolia and the emergence of the petrochemical cluster here in Sarnia Lambton, what we're trying to do here is repeat the same thing. In 2013, BIC launched a project with BioAmber and Lanxess and Agris Co-op to look into could we collect corn stover and wheat straw and convert that into sugars that could be used as feedstocks. From that study, the Cellulosic Sugar Producers Co-op was formed. Comet Biorefining was identified as a very good company that could align with them, and now the CSPC and Comet are partnering together to build a cellulosic sugar co-op, or a cellulosic sugar plant on the TransAlta lands. And when this happens, this will be the first cellulosic sugar to glucose supply chain ever in the world. So this is a pretty exciting project. There's been a lot of effort put into this. Over $600,000 of government and partner money have gone into this, and none of this has actually came from the local producers community. Another project that's came out of that, also looking at sugars, has been the potential to use sugar beet sugars also as feedstocks for companies like BioAmber. BIC is currently supporting a $300,000 project with the sugar beet producers to develop a design, engineering scope, and cost estimates for a 120,000 ton per year sugar plant. So this could be very exciting. And if BioAmber were to choose to build their new plant here in Sarnia, and that's been common news around the community, they would have enough capacity to consume all of these sugars, both from the Comet plant and from the sugar beet plant, as well as some other sources. BIC has recently been in the press as supporting investments in a couple of local projects. Comet Biorefining, we just recently announced a $500,000 investment in Comet Biorefining, who are going to build a plant on TransAlta lands. And we recently announced an investment in Ubiquity Solar, who's also looking at doing their demonstration plant at the TransAlta lands. Another very interesting project we have in the area is that Biox, a company by the name of Biox, who are a biodiesel producer, have bought the Methys land in Sombra. And this now provides a third brownfield development site for us here in Sarnia Lambton to go along with the TransAlta and the Lanxess or Lanxeo lands. What we're finding now is we've got a number of projects in our pipeline at BIC today that fit in either 3 of those locations, as well as potential projects that could come on to the Sarnia Lambton, Western Sarnia Lambton Research Park. So what's our current portfolio? Currently, we took that $5.5 million and we've invested it in 14 companies, and we have a value of that portfolio of over $10 million. Unfortunately for us, only about $900,000 of that is liquid, and the other $9 million of it is tied up in equity investments in startup companies that we can't yet liquidate and get the value from. And there lies the... So if we were to draw on our existing liquid funds, we could generate approximately $1 million or $900,000 that we could use to match up with FedDev funding. What is our requirements with FedDev matching funds? We have a need for $5.5 million to match up against 1-to-1 with federal funding at $5.5 million as well. Of that $5.5 million, we had monies in our reserves to match up with the first $1 million of that, and now we're here today asking for some backing against a loan so we could go against that $4.5 million. We need the more urgent need of this is because we were delayed getting started on our project. We were not able to invest or spend all of the money we had this year from FedDev, and we have $1 million sitting in our monies that we could get from FedDev if we spend it before the end of March. If we do not spend it by the end of March, that money will be lost and it will go back to the federal government. So what was the request? We're looking for backing for a line of credit for $4.5 million and a short-term loan that we could have in place by the end of March for up to $1 million to be able to leverage those existing government funds that are sitting there for us to get. And it is BIC's intention to support this line of credit paying interest on that using our liquid assets we have. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. Questions of council? Councillor Bukowicz.
Companies in the cluster did go with IPO. Are there any more in the pipelines that perhaps we'll see in the near future?
There's three that have IPO'd. Ecosynthetics, Blue Ocean Nutrisciences, and BioAmber. There's one company that appears like it could IPO in the next while, and that would be Vive Crop Protection.
Another question. You mentioned BioAmber. Obviously, they had IPO. The stock is going sideways, about $3 on NASDAQ right now. And you know that last month the CEO of BioAmber did step down. It's always personal reason, but is there some rough waters ahead? Because that doesn't happen very often when the CEO is stepping down.
I would not take anything from that announcement as it having anything to do with BioAmber as the company itself. The company itself seems to be doing very, very well. The plant's running well. I know JF very well because we go back to those early days when I was at Lanxess and I was working with them to sign those contracts for the first construction. And JF is stepping back for personal reasons, and that is truly the reasons here. And I think I would not take anything out of these press releases or him stepping down as being negative to BioAmber. I think it's just timing. Yes, he's still on the board. He's still staying on as advisor, and they've taken a very strong individual from inside their organization, Fabrice, and stepped him up into the CEO, into the president role. So I think they're well. I think they're in a good position, as strong a position as the companies are in this sector.
But I presume he maintained his personal holdings, right?
There was no announcements that he sold anything, so I would expect that they're all still there. All his investments are still in there. Because I'm sure they would have had to announce that. Oh, yes, that's required. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Marshall? Councillor Bradley.
Just, Mr. Marshall, first of all, for County Council, there's been an incredible amount of work done by everyone involved in this, and particularly Mr. Innes and Mr. Van Horn, to make this work. The resolution is a bit different than the original approach to the research park. It is staggered, which I think is, and the board and I have discussed this, I think that's a much better protection for the county. This will work for you with FedDev, instead of getting the full sum now, you'll get it in a staggered basis based on performance. That will work with you and with FedDev?
What we need is to have the availability of the funds and to be able to invest it as we need to. The pace at which it comes to us, as long as it falls within our tranche requirements, is fine.
Any other questions? Follow-up? Well, that report's down in the, I think we'll, Councillor McGugan.
Yeah, Mr. Warden, members of County Council, Mr. Marshall, I do say thank you for your presentation, and it's been my pleasure to be able to be somewhat involved from the day one in this whole Stover business. I do have a couple comments and a couple questions. The comment is, I believe the Comet plant right today is struggling to find enough stover and enough wheat straw. I did have a chance yesterday to talk to somebody from the research there, and it is a struggle. Secondly, I see in the report that I believe Mr. Innes put together that we're talking about 41% of any profit. How do you plan to pay the money back? I'll just leave you with a couple questions. Look forward to your answer. How do you plan to pay the money back? And you're asking for $4.5 million. If you were given $1 million now, I'm calling it a loan. I'm not calling it a grant. And then you need to come back with a business plan and a whole, I hate to use the word, but a plan for the other $2.5 million that you want at the end of August. So maybe you could answer some of those questions. And are all the work that you're doing, is it all going to be beneficial to, I'm not saying Lambton County, but southwestern Ontario? Or are some of these jobs, I think that you did have a wood plant in there on a tour I had, and most of that work was going up into northeastern Ontario in the Pembroke area. So the idea is great. Financially, we need to look after the money of the residents of Lambton County.
Two or three questions in there. The first, yes, with Comet obtaining or working with the co-op to get all of the stover, it's been more difficult than they anticipated that it would be, and they're still working aggressively at that. And they'll keep working. I believe that will ultimately happen in the end, but I agree with you that it's been more difficult than they thought that was going to be. Second question was, will all this funding, or does this funding have a benefit to Ontario or to this region? Our FedDev funding restricts us to investing in projects in southern Ontario. Now, the FedDev definition of southern Ontario is anything south of North Bay and Ottawa, basically. So it's a very broad definition. So we can invest in projects anywhere across southern Ontario. But also key to our funding with FedDev is that we are to work on the building of clusters with a particular focus on the development of the Sarnia-Lambton cluster. We've been working on it since 2008. You can see here we are in 2017, 9 years later. You can see a bioamber plant there. You can see some other projects coming along, but it's not like we've got 1,000 plants running in the country in 9 years. So it takes a long time to do these things. So we need to stay focused on building out the Sarnia-Lambton cluster, making it a success so that it can then be a model that's used across Canada. So right now, of the funding we have from FedDev, over half of it has been spent in Sarnia-Lambton specifically, half of the investments in Sarnia-Lambton specifically, and probably 60 to 70% of the project funding has came into the Sarnia-Lambton region. So when you consider it's a one-to-one match, then Sarnia-Lambton, more money's coming into Sarnia-Lambton than is coming directly from us, or would be from the loans backed by council. Is that?
How do you plan to pay the $1 million back, and how long would it take?
So basically, we have a portfolio valued at over $10 million, of which I said about $900,000 of that is liquid. That $900,000 will be used to service any of the costs associated with this debt instrument. We have $9 million. We have 3 projects. There are 3 companies that we believe have value of in excess of $9 million. On the exit of any of those companies, we would take the funds, our funds from those, and put it right directly back to pay off the loan and to get out of any debt we would have. It's not our intention to manage a long-term debt practice inside of BIC. This is a bridge to get us through to the place where we can get our funds out of our exits.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Bruzewicz.
Mr. Marshall, you mentioned that part of your portfolio is liquid. Quality, if you look at the mix of this liquidity, what is it? Is it BioAmber stock or what?
With BioAmber, they're paying back as interest and principal at a rate of $100,000 a year to us. That loan will be paid back off by 2020. And we have in that portfolio 2 stocks that are traded, one on the TSX and one on the TSX Ventures that we could liquidate and sell at any time we chose to. We're choosing not to at this point in time because we're working with those companies to help them improve their financial positions, and we believe those valuations, the stock values will go up. So we've chose not to sell them at this point in time. And we have a small loan with the Cellulose and Sugar Producers Cooperative that once they would actually take their money out of escrow, we would get paid back. So there is funds there that we could get our hands on today, and there's certainly more liquid than the equity stakes we have in companies like Vive Crop Protection.
Question, you mentioned a couple of other IPOs, so your liquidity would dramatically improve if those IPOs are successful, I presume. You see that happen?
Specifically, I would anticipate that there would be one of those that would IPO within the next 2 years. But again, these are very difficult things to predict because it all depends on the way the markets are going at any given time.
So you have ready to step in, or you're still looking for one?
The companies do that. We're an equity holder in the company, so we don't get directly involved in them doing their IPOs. We go along in the IPO the same as any other early stage investor would.
Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Question to Sandy. You've been to the bank. The bank's got lots of money. The banks do not take risks. How did they like your business case on this loan for $4.5 million in the matter they have to have a backer? Thank you.
One telephone call with John and the county. Clearly, our portfolio is not bank investable. There is $900,000 of value there that they see as being liquid and suitable at some level. But quite frankly, the equity investment stake we have in the companies is not something banks are ready to take risk on. So that in there lies the reason why we need backing from the county to do this, because we can't get backing, or we can't go to the bank directly on our own.
Councillor Napper.
Well, thank you very much. What happens if this went south and we didn't fund you? Would these companies leave there, or would they just look other places for financing? I know you got quite a bit of investment in them to get this far, I think. Where would we be at there if we done that?
$1 million that we would obtain from this loan is matched up 1-to-1 with FedDev government funding. So that gives us $9 million to invest in early stage companies. If we don't have that money, we can't invest in those early stage companies. that opportunity would be lost. Right now, we have a lot of companies that are paying attention to us in Sarnia-Lambton for two reasons, well, three reasons. One is a very good place to come, and they've seen that from the likes of BioAmber. But they also believe that the funding support we can bring them through projects and the equity stake we can take in them through our investments are very important parts of attracting them here. If you look into the U.S., they have government-backed loans. They have communities that have their own investment funds that are doing these sorts of things directly in the United States. That I know that's something that we can't necessarily do here in Canada in the same way as they do in the U.S., but we are very challenged to compete with the U.S. Groups like BIC and the ways that we can support projects through our project funding and invest in them through equity stakes is very important. The other thing that you need to keep in mind is through our board, who are very large, very significant group of distinguished people out of the chemical industry, when we do our due diligence and look at companies and we decide we're going to invest in companies, there's a lot of venture companies, venture firms and angels out there who don't understand the technologies, don't understand this space, and they look at the advice and look at the decision we make and saying, these guys are putting $500,000 in here to go and invest in this company, and these venture companies come along with us, and actually we have one group right now out of Vancouver asking us to be the lead of a syndicate because they believe if we go in and invest with the knowledge and credibility and acumen of our business acumen of our group, that they can bring along many $1 million of other investment into these startup companies. So if we don't have the money to invest, we can't be that lead, we can't take that stake, and we can't do things like what we did with BioAmber and said, we will invest $500,000 in you if you build in Canada. These are the stipulations of our investments. So when we're looking at companies like now, some of the ones we're working with right now, we say, we will invest $500,000 in you if you build this demonstration plant in Lambton. We don't have the ability to leverage that if we don't have the money.
Thank you. Councillor Broad.
Thank you, Warden Weber. Mr. Marshall, I got a question for you. It looks like, it appears like the county is going to be part of a risk capital group or investment. And when I Googled risk capital, it says high risk and high rewards. I'm seeing the risks. Could you please explain the high rewards that we're going to get of it?
Today, it's valued at over $10 million, which is a 2x, which is a doubling of the value of that money. So that, if you look at most venture firms, they are high risk, high reward. They invest in that to try and get multiples on their money. Right now, we believe we can get a 2x on our portfolio of $5.5 million we put in. So that's a doubling over 7 to 10 years.
Just to follow up, Mr. Marshall, so the county's going to get 2 times on the money we're investing?
BIC has the portfolio, and so we're looking to double. What we will do is we will pay the interest and principal on that, and there will be a sharing of some of that profitability with the county.
Yeah, thanks for that response. I watched too much Dragon's Den, so I just needed some clarification.
Councillor Marriott.
Thank you, Warden. Mr. Marshall, I guess back to the feedstock issue. I just want to make it clear that this is a lot different than the ethanol back a few years ago, where that originated in the U.S. and we had a lot of big companies in Canada. Suncor put a lot of money in to get it started here, but the cellulosic thing has not, I mean, it's been very small in the U.S. And the fact that they've been working hard this winter in this area and have not been able to get the interest of the farmers like they hoped, and because they're looking for investment from each farmer to be able to sell, to supply the feedstock. So it's very concerning that they haven't been able to get the base amount of feedstock from this area. And going forward, if they don't, like, I'm a little bit concerned about the risk to the county, because this, I still don't see where we have security for that, like especially if the feedstock doesn't follow through.
That one project is a one in a number of the projects we have. So it's not the only project we're doing. All that said, it's a very, very important project for us because we believe leveraging the agricultural residues that are here in this region to support the cluster development is very, in long term, very important. I guess the one thing I would say that's different between what the ethanol guys, the cellulosic ethanol guys, have done in the States versus what we're trying to do here is all the other projects that are being done in the world are all going to fuels. They're all trying to make ethanol for fuel. Ethanol is fungible. You can sell it anytime you want, but you don't get very much for it. And so when you start looking at the cost benefit, the economics of a project where you're making ethanol from biomass, the economics don't work very well. In fact, they don't work without government subsidy. This project's different in that there's no government subsidy sitting in any of this. Basically, the economics of this is people invest, people get a return, and at the end of the day, we build a plant. Is it high risk, and are the producers in this region slower to adopt to this? Yes, because it is risky. There's no doubt. This is new. This has not been done anywhere else in the world. So we're asking producers who understand farming to say, we're going to take our biomass and we're going to provide it into this co-op, and we're going to invest money into this sugar plant, and we're going to make money on that. That's a big step outside of the norm of buying more land or what other methods might be there for them to make funding. But the payback on that project is still 3 to 4 years for the producers. The challenge is 3 to 4 years with the risk. They're all struggling to trade that off. And certainly the producers have some questions about compaction. They see the equipment. They see how it's running across the fields. It's been done elsewhere. And that doesn't appear to be a big issue in the long run. But if it's my fields that this equipment is going to be running over, I'm going to ask these hard questions, and I'm going to be cautious. And I think that's part of all the issues that are sitting in this right now. But I still believe that the group that's working on this will move this along to the point that that plant will get built. And in the early stages, it may not be 100% serviced with agricultural residues. There's potentials for that plant to use other things as well. They prefer not to, because the best economics are to have a full partnership right off the get-go, but we'll see.
Follow-up?
Yes. Thank you. So if they did obtain enough feedstock from Stover, how many truckloads is proposed in the proposal?
I can do some head math again. 75,000 tons a year is the amount of material going into that plant. Each truck holds 45 bales. It's 45 at 1,100 kilograms. What's that? 25 tons. So 25 tons on a truckload, 75,000. Is that 3,000 trucks? 10 a day. I think if I got my math right.
My last follow-up would be to Mr. Cole. Have we studied that, our road structure in Lambton can take another minimum 3,000 truck traffic counts in the county?
Through you, Mr. Warden, I can't say that we haven't specifically looked at that aspect, but the premise of the county road network is that it's designed for the commercial traffic in the county, and it would that's where those loads would have to be directed is along the county road network. We would manage that on an ongoing basis.
There is one question nobody seems to have asked. It's related to the question that Councillor Broad raised, risk-reward. And I would like to have your comment, because you're taking pre-IPO positions, and I can tell you stories and stories of the situation when people take a position at 25 cents, IPO is at $5, the stock goes to $50. So that's a possibility. And of course, IPO is not the only way to realize royalty flows from patents, can be extremely profitable. In fact, in case like that, the IPO is really done for a reason. So you actually can realize tremendous upside returns without even IPO, or through the equity investment in the companies. So now the question I have, say that you have one of those extreme success stories that all of a sudden, what is through IPO and market appreciation, there's several $1 billion worth of value coming from the little positions you have now. And that amount exceeds the actually viable opportunities that, what's the exit to that? Is the county going to get $1 billion out of that or what?
At this point in time, that has not been discussed in detail. I guess as a not-for-profit organization, our mandate is to take these investment funds, cash them, and then turn them around and reinvest them back into other opportunities for Canada. So at this point in time, our focus is obviously in southern Ontario and heavily in the Lambton area. For us to get billions would be incredible, but right now our expectation or our intention at BIC is to try and grow our investment fund to be $50 to $100 million. If we can grow it to be $50 to $100 million, then BIC can manage itself sustainably with the management fees of that money, and we no longer have to take government funds to keep us alive. And as we would say, trying to continue to move forward as a government-funded organization is difficult because you spend a great portion of your time always trying to chase the next round of government funding. So one of the things we're trying to do is to grow this fund to a place where it can sustain the organization. For us to invest $50 or $100 million would not be that difficult. There are venture funds. Sophie Nova just finished up filling a venture fund in France for 100 million euro to put into the bioeconomy. If you start doing early stage investments, but you also start to do more follow-on investment, where you actually put in more money later on in the later rounds to get the companies to the end point, you can manage a fund of $50 or $100 million and put that money out effectively.
Councillor McGugan, did you have a...
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Warden, members of County Council. Let's say you end up today, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, that you do get the $1 million today. Does that eliminate the federal government from the other $3.5 million? Do they have to have a commitment today, or can you come back in August with a business plan and say, we've accomplished this over this last 6 months? Or where are we if you were given $1 million today? Does that enhance the money from Ottawa, or does it not?
It doesn't really change it. At this point in time, we have a need overall in this program. We had a need for $5.5 million. We've matched the first $1 million. We have now a need to match the remaining $4.5 million 1-to-1, or we don't get the money. It's that simple. Inside of the presentation, there was a profile which said that we need to have $2.5 million in our bank account by this September to get the next $2.5 million of the government money. We need $2 million, an additional $2 million in our bank account by September of 2018 to get the last $2 million. So officially, according to our contract, we need $2.5 million by this September and $2 million by the following September. The reason the $1 million is in discussion at this point in time is because because of us getting our funding very late, we spent most of 2016 ramping ourselves up, And so we were unable to spend all of the project money that was allotted to us by the federal government. And it's, again, the same problem. If you don't spend it, you don't get it matched. So the $1 million in our bank account by the end of March allows us to save that $1 million of project money that is sitting there underutilized that would go back to the federal government if we didn't have it by then. So the $1 million is really part of the $2.5 million by September.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments at this time? The actual report is the second item down in the agenda, so we can, if there was a motion, if somebody wanted to move it forward in the agenda or to deal with it when it comes up. Councillor Bradley.
Why don't we deal with it now? I'll move that motion to bring it forward and also to endorse the recommendation.
You move that we bring it forward in the agenda and endorse the recommendation, seconded by Councillor Gillis. Questions on the recommendation to the motion? And that's report A. Councillor Bradley.
Briefly to the motion, there's a lot of good questions that have been raised here about risk, and there's a lot of risk to this. There's no question to that. But I also remember, it was probably 50 years ago, there was risk to starting Lambton College. There was risk 15 years ago starting the research park. And we've seen what comes from taking risk. I think the one thing I just want to raise is that for years in this chamber and elsewhere, we've been asking for the federal and provincial governments to invest in the region, in the area, in this community. And here's an opportunity that exists, and it is an opportunity, but if we decide to say no, and there is no other place to turn for this funding, then we will be turning back to the federal government $4.5 million that was going to be used to take risk and to invest in the new economy, one that we've endorsed very strongly here. So that, to me, is what swayed me at the end, was that if we say no, then all these other efforts to bring in federal and provincial monies, I think, will be negated because we have shown that we cannot work to make things happen. So I do hope people will endorse this motion.
Councillor Gillis.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, County and members of County Council. I agree with my colleague, specifically after we've already had the situation where Lambton College build was hinged on what we were going to do. We came up with the $5 million, and then the federal government came up with 20, I think, and the province came up with 20. We made the initial step. Now it's in reverse. But I do see that if we aren't willing to invest in our own economies and our own people and in our own county, then what does it say about us when we go knocking on the door and asking for money to try to prove our case? So from my perspective, given what we've done in the past, particularly with Lambton College in the most recent history, this to me seems very much the same. So yes, there is risk, but there is risk with everything we do, and we're always saying that the biggest problem we have in Lambton County right now is a depopulation. So if we want to bring ourselves back to the glory days, we're going to have to reinvest in our own county, and that's what I see this doing.
Councillor McDougall.
Yes, thank you, Warden Weber, members of County Council, and thank you, Mr. Marshall, for your presentation today. Economic development is about jobs and future economies, and, you know, there isn't a higher concern in Lambton County with our people than a future economy that can sustain our children, our grandchildren, and our region into the future. And Mr. Marshall made it pretty clear this morning that we're highly challenged to compete with the U.S., and we've all been watching that for the last number of years. I'm happy to hear that your board is made up of distinguished people with experience and wisdom from chemical companies that have been really the mainstay of our local economy for decades. But today is about moving in new directions. And I think there isn't anything more important for us right now in southwestern Ontario, in Sarnia-Lambton, than to be seen as a leader towards this new economy. A cleaner, a greener, and down the road, a sustainable economy. We watched over the last number of years some instability with the research park that got back on its feet. We've seen cycles in our petrochemical economy that went up and down over time. But right now is a time for us as municipal leaders to put some confidence in behind the experience and wisdom of people who have been in business in this area for many, many years. I want to see our money leverage other investments in Canada and hopefully in Lambton. But southwestern Ontario, according to the Premier and many, many discussions in media, we've struggled to find our place and to find our future. And as a municipal leader today, I want to be able to look at my kids and I want to be able to look at future generations that are growing up around us now to say, when it was time for us to step up, we did. Yeah, there's risk. There's risk in almost all that we do. But economic development is a tough, tough business in these times. And we have to go after it to compete. We can't do it like they do across the border, but we can do what we can do here. So I'm going to support this recommendation because my vote is a vote for the future now. And as a leader, I want to be remembered for somebody that supported when the time was here to step up and do that. So I applaud the work of Mr. Innes you know, taking care that we can step along with this. First off, not losing the $1 million that we need to protect immediately, and to step up towards the fall when we'll know that Lambton County stepped up when it was needed, and together with BIC we'll find a future economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Bruzowicz.
I believe that the approach that Mr. Marshall is guiding us through is correct one. The portfolio approach is the only reasonable way to go through. You will have failures and you have some success. And again, the steps from pre-IPO investment followed by IPO and so on. And it's not just companies like Apple that started in the garage that led to the, stratospheric rise in the returns. In the area of chemistry, I don't know whether any of you is familiar with the late Jerry Zucker. This man and it was all, a big part of it was related to chemistry. And again, like he did later on follow up, like he bought Hudson Bay Company one time a few years ago. You may be aware of Mr. Zucker. He had something like 350 patents, power of the mind. And what we have here, and the bigger the portfolio, the better chance of superior returns. So this is the correct approach. Those returns will eventually. You just have to connect with the bright minds and help them and benefit in the road ahead. So I have no problem to support. I think that's actually prudent thing to do. And again, there are risks, there will be failures, but there can be there's also the other side of the coin, which is superior returns. And I trust that will happen.
Thank you. Anyone else before I call the vote? Okay. Recorded vote requested. And the recommendation, everyone has that for the 1 million, and it's got some conditions on that need to be met before that gets. So I would call on the clerk to read the vote.
Well, the randomizer chose Councillor Case, but he is absent, so we'll begin with Councillor Cook. Yes. Councillor Gilliland? No. Councillor Gillis? Yes. Councillor Hand? Yes. Councillor McDougall? Yes. Councillor Marriott? No. Deputy Warden McCharles? Yes. Councillor McGugan? Yes. Councillor Napper? Warden Weber? Yes. Councillor Arnold? No. Councillor Bouchy? Yes. Councillor Bradley? Yes. Councillor Broad? No. And Councillor Brucewich? Yes. And that carries 27-7.
Thank you. That motion is carried. Thank you, Mr. Marshall, for your presentation, your time.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Safe flight back to the south. And we'll move on to item 8 on the agenda, which is require a motion that council be sitting as the institution members for the Lambton County Community Development Corporation and confirm the following appointments. Moved by Councillor Broad. We go into the committee, seconded by Councillor McDougall. Questions regarding that? We're just confirming the appointments is the only action at this. All in favor of that? That is carried. Thank you. We should have a motion to convene, go back to sit as a county council again. Councillor McDougall, seconded by Councillor Gillis. All in favor of that? That is carried. Other business. We have one item listed here. Councillor Bradley.
I'll move the motion that I sent to the staff about a week ago. It's really a re-endorsement of a position the county took a number of years ago, along with City Council, and it's a direct letter to the minister on the repository that's proposed for Kincardine, and this letter will go from over 150 mayors to the minister.
Okay, so that's moved by Councillor Bradley, seconded by Councillor Arnold. This resolution, the letter be sent. All in favor of that? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Any other business? Councillor Broad.
Thank you, Warden Weber. You've seen in the press there that Premier Wynne has found some money for the City of Ottawa, I believe it was, for some drug enforcement, patch for patch, whatever you want to call it. Maybe it'd be a good time for this county council. I know we approved it once. Maybe it'd be a good time for us to send off our support that we had last time for them, and maybe the Premier can send some money down to Sarnia, Lambton for sure. Thanks to the police services out of Sarnia, the constable was very much a vital part of the Patch for Patch program, and I'm pretty passionate about the program. So if we could send our support again to the Premier, and hopefully she'll send some money our way.
Seconder for that, Councillor Bradley. Any questions regarding that?
Yeah,
Councillor Bradley.
Just if I could add to that, I did copy County Council. I did request to Mr. Van Horn if the Community Health Group could put together a package when this meeting is called. The meeting seems to be very awkward. To invite every mayor in Ontario could be very difficult to make it functional. But when that does happen, whoever wishes to attend, that we would have the background that would assist us, not just patch with patch, but what other programs throughout Lambton County are assisting people, and what upgrades do they need to make them happen. And I applaud Mayor Broad for his resolution, because it was this chamber that really pushed that to make this a provincial-wide program.
Okay. I know at the time we passed the patch for patch, we did send it off to the province, so we'll reconfirm that, put together a package. Any other questions regarding that? All in favor of that? That's carried. Thank you. Notice of bylaws. Bylaw 12. please.
Yes, thank you, Warden. There'll be a motion before County Council moved by the Bevs, Councillors Hand and McDougall, that bylaw number 9 of 2017 as circulated be taken as read a first and second time.
Questions? All in favor? That's carried.
Warden, there's also a motion before County Council that bylaw number 9 of 2017 as circulated be taken as read a third time and finally passed. That's moved by Councillor Marriott and seconded by Deputy Warden McCharles.
Questions? All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Just before we go to the adjournment, we have a letter here from the Lambton College regarding their tree planting and celebrations for the Canada's 150. It's on April 5th, the day of our next council meeting. There is an invitation from the college, and we have in our recommendation for adjournment, we probably are going to need to start our council meeting earlier. Councillor Bradley.
When you raised that before, would there be any merit in just postponing or putting our meeting the next day? Because if I understand correctly, most of the people in this chamber are going to have to fly around Lambton County. And, you know, if the work's starting early, fine, but maybe it's better if we start, maybe we have it the next day or the day before. Could I just suggest we leave that to your judgment with staff to work out?
Is there, I know we have not usually moved the day of the meeting. We did this year because of the conference. There is a meeting scheduled, and it's been advertised quite public that the official plan is coming back on April the 5th.
I don't want to miss that debate. Just leave it as it is. That's fine.
The suggestion would be that we
start at 6 a.m.?
The suggestion that would be we would start at 8 a.m. If there is an in-camera session, and instead of having the usual half an hour between our in-camera session and our other meeting, that we have the regular open meeting starting at 8:15, and if we don't need an in-camera session, the regular meeting will start at 8:15. So if we could have a motion to adjourn with that changes from the 8 o'clock start to an 8:15, Councillor Marriott, seconded by Councillor Cook. Questions on that? So we're going to start at 8 if we need it in camera, 8:15 if we don't need it in camera. So all in favor of that? That's carried. Thank you.